Guided by
The views and opinions expressed in these radio programs are those of the individual hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of Universal Broadcasting Network.
You're listening to The Dr. D Show about neuropsychology and well-being. Get the knowledge you must have to live a powerful, positive life. The Dr. D Show. Here for you.
Welcome to the Dr. D Show today. We are very excited to talk about a topic that's very much of importance, and we're going to introduce it shortly. First, just as a reminder, this is a psychoeducational show. It is not meant to provide you with professional mental health advice or therapy. So if you do suffer from a particular problem, please do reach out to professional help. With that in mind, some of the topics that we cover are not appropriate for the younger population. So if you have little people listening, please use your discretion. And with that, please, I would like to welcome our interviewee today. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
Would you introduce a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay. I am Farron. I'm a retired Sergeant First Class United States Army, and I'm a sickle cell trait prevention advocate.
And will you tell us briefly how many years you've served?
I served 24 years total.
It's
United States
unbelievable.
Army. Yes, thank you.
Unbelievable. Well, first of all, before anything, then we have so much to talk about today, so it's really exciting. And it's very important. I really feel that this is going to be a beginning of something very important.
Definitely.
For me in this area and a continuation for your amazing work. But first, I would like to thank you for your service to our country. Now more than ever, we know the situations that we're facing. And there's never a shortage, unfortunately, of a need for brave people in our country to do the work, and this work has to be done. And so thank you so much for that.
Thank you again.
And for our listeners today, we are talking about today, the subject of today is awareness for sickle cell anemia and sickle cell trait and what the population and individuals who suffer from these conditions go through. We're going to really kind of assume that we're all new to this information in one way or the other. I will bring in neuropsychological findings that we know in this area and what it looks like for on our end in neuropsychology. But what's important is always to bring it home and what individuals that actually go through the conditions have to deal with, because this is a chronic condition. Let's go ahead, Farron. Tell us a little bit more about the condition.
About the condition, so it's a inherited gene, sickle cell trait. A person with sickle cell trait inherits one copy from one of the parents, the mom or the dad. Sickle cell disease is where the child inherits two copies of the gene from both parents. Sickle cell trait inherited, like I said, from Africa is where it came from. It has a purpose. It fights malaria. So in that population during back in the times when malaria would infect a person would survive if they had sickle cell trait or sickle cell disease. So in that part of the country, it served the purpose. Out of that environment, here in the United States, it seems to be more of a disparity or a problem in our community here.
And anemia in general, there is a sensitivity to anemia, or it presents more also in the Middle East in general. And that's one of the reasons is it's really a protective mechanism for the body. But when you change the environment for individuals, historically, that's just what we do. Our bodies have to adjust, and not always they're capable to do that in 1 or 2 generations.
And that's one of the things I'm out to disappear, is that it's not just an African American issue. It's a global issue. Like you said, Mediterranean, European, Greek, Asian, Caucasian. Because you have to know where your bloodline is from, is where you determine if you carry that gene in your body. And so Hispanics number 2, we're number 1. We're 1 in 12, but Hispanics are between 1 and 1,200 carry the sickle cell trait, and 1 out of 36,000 actually carry the disease. And so I've met people with sickle cell disease with that are Hispanic, and a lot of them don't acknowledge that that's what that is. So.
Well, I'll tell you, my grandfather comes from Yemen, so a part of my origin is also Yemen, and he passed away at the age of 72 from anemia. And there was such lack of knowledge back then on what he was going through and how to deal with it, and really there was just no way back then that they knew of to prevent the
Right.
deterioration that he was going through. And it took us years to figure out what was going on really, and then really be proactive about it and get the family members tested and see where we're standing.
Right.
But absolutely, we find it a lot in the Middle East. We also find it with other sensitivities, and I won't go into that too much today, but there's other physiological issues that happens with nutrition and other things
Yes.
where if you come from a particular origin, for example, with Yemen and Middle Eastern, high sensitivity to sugars, even above and beyond white, more white Caucasian European
Right.
descendant people. And so the effect that it would have on our body is a lot more detrimental. So I'm
Right.
cognizant on that and have very little sugar in my diet, hardly at all. But I watch it for my children as well. And I think
Yes.
we're going to talk a little bit later
Oh,
on
definitely.
about being
Diet
proactive.
Yes, diet is very important. And if
Mhm.
I could mention about sickle cell trait and sickle cell disease, there are other genes that, when come in contact with sickle cell trait, form a form of sickle cell disease. So you could have sickle cell trait, and your mate could have thalassemia trait. And if
Mhm.
you're not aware that you carry these two genes, your child could be born because you can pass the S and they pass the thalassemia. The child has sickle cell thalassemia. So our community is combined with different gene types because you may have a person with sickle cell SC or
Mhm.
sickle cell thalassemia or sickle cell SD. Sickle cell SD. There's so many, variations of red blood cell conditions.
Mhm.
So my voice is to find out what's in your genes, so to be able to create a conversation about you talking to your mate, like, hey, not just let's go out to dinner, but have a
Yes.
serious conversation. And most of us don't really have those type of conversations.
Absolutely. This is an excellent point you're mentioning. In Israel, in the last 20 years, they are testing. They're actually promoting and advocating for couples that are dating to test themselves to do the full genetic makeup.
Yes.
Because also in a Jewish European lineage, for example,
Mhm.
they carry over 40 major diseases where babies die very early. There's
Yes.
certain conditions, and just by preventing from the next generation to have to suffer, and you as a parent have to deal with that. I think it's a great proactive way. But you don't find that in colleges here. You don't find that in like who talks about these things?
You don't.
And I always laugh and say, what are we doing teaching them how to actually do the act? Like, that's seriously now, you can actually watch that on TV, you can figure it out. I
Exactly.
mean, you put somebody in a jungle, don't know what to do, right? It's like no brainer there. But why aren't we teaching them the things that
To be responsible.
to be responsible, to be knowledgeable, to be proactive, to know to look at life at a span of time and not look
Yes.
at it at a moment. And I always feel like how weird it is that we're teaching them the thing they're gonna know anyways. But I agree with that. Let's go back a little bit to what it actually means in terms of the effect on the body. What happens to our cells?
So what happens? A person with, I'll just say it myself. I carry one copy of the gene, the sickle cell trait. I had an experience called sickle cell trait exertion, where my one copy of the S gene actually mutated, and I lost, come to find out, 40% of oxygen in my body,
Wow.
which triggered other injuries, called rhabdomyolysis, renal failure, vertigo. I had a lot of issues because of that gene mutating. So with a person with sickle cell disease, when both of those, they carry two copies of the gene. So when both of those genes mutate, you're talking about like a 405 traffic jam. Literally,
Wow.
when the red blood cells mutate, they become stiff and sticky, and to circulate through the blood veins and the capillaries, they get clogged. And so wherever they clog at is where the pain is, because there's no oxygen getting to that part of the body. So it could be the hands, the feet, the organs. It could, wherever blood flows, they can have a crisis.
And there's just so much to deal with.
Yes.
Okay, at the same time, really what it does. So let's think about our body for a second. We're talking about a physiological situation where you've got pain in various areas in the body, and it could be a sudden pain, it could be something that gradually increases, and it takes a while, and it could be various amount of time before that pain goes away. So now you're dealing with pain. But let's add to that the factor that what we're really saying is that oxygen is not getting to the cells
Exactly.
properly. At the end of the day, not only that it causes pain, but you need oxygen for the rest of your body to function. So that can ultimately create fatigue.
Yes.
It creates
I think that's the number one symptom in people with sickle cell trait and disease is the perception of you're lazy, but actuality is that you're fatigued because of your oxygen in your body and you're tired and things like that. So you're not able to have the energy. So that's one of the
And
issues.
that fatigue can be translated in psychological assessment and particularly in neuropsychological assessment. So I will tell you that in my area, when we're testing a child or an adult who is suffering from sickle cell, or it could be other conditions that relate to loss of oxygen or a deprivation of oxygen to the cells, for example, severe apnea and so forth,
Yes.
that creates
Asthma.
slowness, asthma, right,
is a
severe
trigger.
asthma, any condition that ultimately disrupts the necessary, the most detrimental process of oxygen getting to the cells, it can create slowing down of reaction time on psychological and cognitive testing.
Yes.
So let's not just think about the testing that we're doing, but definitely in those testing, there's something we call processing speed. So if your processing speed is now slower, it is affected because it takes a long time for your body to go ahead and create the reaction that's needed, or for your brain to respond to the task at hand. It's going to affect the result that you have in the testing, and it's going to affect other results that you have in academic and learning environments.
Yes.
And that's a point that I would like to really share with you, if nothing else today, because this is how it affects children from a very young age, and they're not able to say that to you because they're not
Exactly.
cognizant of what it means. They don't have the words for it. They cannot describe it to you. This is just something that's happening to them as they're trying to figure it out. So it is our responsibility for teachers, for professionals, to identify not only identify these children that are struggling with that, even, by the way, if they don't show neurological problems. It's very interesting. In neuropsychology, what we found out, there's tiny multi infarcts in the brain, or little strokes, tiny little strokes, and little areas where we'll have bleeding. We call it hemorrhaging in the brain. You're not going to detect that necessarily in brain imaging. Our technology is not advanced enough, and yet if the child or the adult is suffering with that, it will have an effect on their functioning in various ways.
I have a lot of community with that when I interview that they have had silent strokes at 7 years old, and the parents, like you said, have no idea because you can't see that until it's a severe stroke, and then it's when they are able to determine, that the child is having this.
Absolutely,
strokes.
and it can happen not just can happen at nighttime. By the way, it's another thing, and you see that also with the older population, which is not what we're talking about today. But mini strokes or transient ischemic attacks happen also during the night, and you can have 2, 3, 5, sometimes 15 in one night, and you don't know. The person wakes up in the morning,
Right.
and you have no idea what they just went through. They just went
Exactly.
through a brain accident or trauma. So these are the things that parents need to know, and teachers need to know, and assessors, because it will affect the functioning. And if we don't touch on that, let's talk a little bit about what happens to the youth, or even before we go to youth. Let's stay with kids first and kind of like progress with time. And it's good to look at it at a span of time, because I think there's
Exactly.
different stages.
Yes.
But Farron, maybe you can share with us, what are the potential implications when a child is struggling with all of these physiological impediments? What is happening?
From interviewing my community, I get so many different stories on how when they're at that age, the mental stress of I can't focus, or the friends aren't the friendship relationship type of things. I mean, it starts to weigh on their mind even at 4 or 5. We don't think that the little kids are comprehending what's going on, but they are. It's just like you say, they're unable to maybe speak it. But once they have gotten older, when they look back and they tell me, at 5, 6 years old, man, I was mentally depressed because I couldn't focus, or I was learning slow, and then all those reactions that go with you give the wrong answer in the classroom, and now they laugh at you, and now you make a decision, and now you're not going to speak anymore, and it just singles them out. And it's, like I said, the mental aspect of it. Being depressed myself 2.5 years is a very important conversation that's not being had in that community.
And not it's not being brought forward to the attention of the adults that are operating with the children. So our responsibility as either parents or teachers is to be the support system for these children and identify the moments when the child is struggling.
Exactly.
We need to see it. It's one of those things, and then address it as it happens. In neuropsychological testing, the few studies that have been done do show that there are significant differences in performance between children who have sickle cell and children who don't. And the differences are in actually multiple areas on the brain that are in charge of many things. So we're talking about executive functioning. We're talking about the area of the brain in the front of the brain I always call the CEO, but is in charge of everything. We have issues there. We have concentration, attention, slowness of reaction. We talked about the processing speed being affected. Memory. It just by the fact that your attention and concentration is not good, how are you going to actually memorize the information if you're too busy? Right. If you're too busy with everything else that's you're struggling just to focus.
Right.
You're struggling to deal with the fatigue. Maybe you're struggling to deal with pain. And now let's add to that the component of depression.
Right. And you want me to learn.
Right. After all of these things I'm dealing with right now, I'm just trying to manage all of this, and I'm only 3 years old.
Yes.
And now you're telling me I need to pay attention.
Yes.
So not seeing the whole picture is a problem.
Definitely.
We have to notice that. And dealing with the depression, let's touch a little bit on that. That's a hard one. I know that's.
Yeah. For me, serving in the military, I had a great career, and I knew that my stress level when I got to that point, I would go to the basketball court, play a few games, 4 or 5 hours, and I would leave it on the court, and that's how I would die. Let my stress out. And at the point where I had my sickle cell trait exertion injury, it was 2006. I had no idea. I was doing the Army physical fitness test. I was working on my master sergeant rank up at Camp Roberts, California. And a normal morning, I did my push-ups, I did my sit-ups, and then I started the 2-mile run. And, we're trained when we're running, I'm talking to myself, and I come around, it's my last lap. So I'm running, I'm looking around, I see all my classmates running. And so I come around that last stretch, and that's where we're trained to sprint that last stretch. So I could hear my instructor with the clock, 15:45, 15:46, and I'm like, hey, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. So I kick in that second gear, and as I sprinted, to take off, I felt like a warm sensation.
Wow.
And I was like, that's weird, but it's 6:30 in the morning. I got this breeze hitting me, but I got this surge of warm energy hit me, and I come across the finish line 16 minutes. I put my hands over my head to get air in my lungs, and so I start to walk around, and then I just noticed it just started getting dark.
Wow.
And I could see like my peripheral, it just started getting dark, and I'm like, man, I don't feel well. Yeah. And so when I kneeled down, I closed my eyes because everything started to spin. So I kneeled down and I just laid back and just closed my eyes real tight. And then when I opened them, everything was spinning like 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I'm like, man, what's going on? And so they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah. Like I knew where I was. Yeah. I didn't pass out, but I knew where I was. But I just
scary experience.
I couldn't open my eyes.
Horrifying.
So they called the medics, took me down to the local hospital, and I was sitting on the bed, and the doctor comes in. They had ran some tests, and he's like, you ever had kidney problems? I'm like, no. He says, well, you do now. And he walks out, and my instructor's like, what is that? And
what
I'm
just
like,
happened?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, and I'm thinking my career is over, right? And so he comes back. They give me a couple IVs. Go get some rest. You should be okay. You're just dehydrated. So I go back to the barracks, go back to sleep, but I wake up, and my condition is getting worse. Everything is still spinning around. I tried to drink some water, Gatorade, ate a banana, threw all that up. Yeah. Barely made it to the bathroom. I was throwing up and crapping at the same time. I don't know how I pulled that off,
but that's severe when you have both happen at the same time.
Yeah. So my classmates came back I know class was over at 4:30, so somewhere around 4:30 they came back to the barracks, and I told them I need to go back to the hospital. I'm not feeling well. Yeah. So they rushed me back, and the night doctor ended up keeping me, and he saw that my CPK levels were over 12,000. Wow. So what happens with the rhabdomyolysis is that once those muscle enzymes break down and get into the bloodstream, they become toxins. And because the kidneys can't filter all that toxins, they start to shut down. So my kidneys were failing at 50% each. Wow. And so all they knew to do was to flush me out with IVs. So I spent 4 days in the hospital.
Yeah, they had to clean up your system. It's getting out of the
And
toxins.
at this point, sickle cell trait was not even a thought of a connection.
Right.
Until 4 years later, when I developed a case of arthritis, and I happened to pass one of my officer friends, and he was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Man, you don't even want to know."
Wow.
He's like, "No, tell me." So I mentioned him what I was going through. He says, "Well, you know, I have sickle cell trait. My muscles locked up on me one time from exercising too, but I have sickle cell trait, and I got to take vitamins and these things." I'm like, "Hold on. Sickle cell trait?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Hey, I think I have that gene." And he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I went back to LA Air Force Base, and I got the physical from 1999. Now, this is 2010.
Wow, this is amazing.
This is 2010. I go back and I get the physical from 1999, and I had a positive sickle cell trait test. So when I remembered taking that physical, they called me in a panic, and they're like, "You need to come back to the clinic." And I'm like, "Uh-oh, like, did I party too hard this weekend? Like, wait, what's going on?" So they called me back, and they set me in the chair and says, "Do you know you have sickle cell trait?" And I'm like, "No."
Right, but you were young.
Yeah, I was 29.
You're like, "Okay, I have a trait."
Yeah,
you know?
and I have a cousin on my dad's side that has the disease. So I'm like, well, I
Yeah.
know I have a cousin, but I know, and that's about all I know.
Sure.
But they didn't give me any information. They just said, "Okay, we just want you to know." But no.
But what does it mean?
Yeah,
Right.
and so
what does it mean
like you
for
say,
me?
I'm at the prime of my career. In one ear, out the other. I'm already playing ball, 4 or
Sure.
5 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I'm just, okay, I have the trait. That's it.
Sure.
And so that was 2006, like I said, when I collapsed. And when 2010, when I found out what was going on with my body, and this, mind you, I was depressed from like November timeframe of 2009. So in 2010, I was literally in the spiral of my depression. So I was up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning,
Sure.
wide
insomnia.
awake, because I'm worried about my career, like it's over. And I like, that was my stability. That was my I provide for my
Of course,
family.
your pride.
Yeah, and my pride. Now, don't just talk about pride. You talk about pride, identity,
Yeah.
and so all that was out of my control. And so the depression, I literally saw myself in the stages. It's like I watched it on film. I saw how when I first saw the message come across my computer, when it said that I was pending discharge, and so when I read that, I'm like, how am I pending discharge when nobody's talked to me? Like, so I called the state surgeon's office, and she explained to me, "No, you're not pending discharge. There's a process." So she told me the process, but I had already digested
Sure.
what I saw on the computer. So I emailed back to the officer and told her, "Can you please change this, because I'm not pending the medical discharge." So they changed it, but I had already
Processed
I
it
already bought
differently.
that. Yeah, I already
Sure.
bought that.
And we process things physically. Because people, a lot of people are not aware of that. But
Yes.
notice what happens to your body when you get bad news, and this kind of news. And this is amazing what you're sharing with us, because part of what has happened and you were going through is really the lack of being able to get that information when you were much younger.
Yeah.
And being able to have a different way of dealing with it. Now, in a way, you were blessed because you had 20
Yes.
something years
Yes.
where you didn't have all of those reactions and your body reactions, and you were able to have an amazing career. And now you're having a different kind of career, which I
Yes.
think is fortuitous, and it has a goal now.
And so now what happened from reading that message on the screen, every day that I went to work, I was like a zombie. I was afraid. I was nervous. When the phone rang, I jumped, because now I'm waiting for that call. And so I just watched myself disconnect from my friends. I didn't want to go watch football no more sports. I just want to be in my room. Isolated. And I wake up at like 6:30 in the morning, because that's my internal clock. But I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't get up, and it'd be 8 o'clock at night, and I haven't done anything. And I just noticed, and one of my friends like, "You know what? You better make sure you're not getting depressed." I'm like, "Depressed? Nah, I'm like, my mind is strong." But I was already
Inside,
in it.
yeah.
I was already in it. And so I felt I needed to go talk to someone. So I went to the LA Air Force Base and started talking to a mental health provider. And we would sit a couple times a week. And it just, like, I heard him, and it lasted enough for me to get back in my car and drive. But as I got back to my home or where I was going, I went back to that thought of, what am I going to do?
Same reality.
And then so it went right back. My story came right back. And so 2.5 years later, my provider, he went on vacation. He went on leave. And another guy, Officer Benjamin, came down as a replacement. So I went in his office, sat down, and he's like, "So I read your chart. I understand we've been coming here for like 2.5 years now. So what's going on? He's like, what are you going to do when you retire? I said, well, God blessed me with a sports brand. So I'll probably just sell some T-shirts and sit on the dock of the bay, watch the tides roll away. And he was like, let me show you something. So he and his colleagues had wrote a book for college student athletes. And in the passage, it talked about sickle cell trait exertion.
Wow.
And so when I read it, I'm like, you know what I went through? He's like, yeah. He's like, it happens. It's becoming common. And I'm like, so I'm in tears, crying. I'm like, well, why aren't they listening to me? Because I'm telling UCLA Medical Center, I'm telling the doctors at the base, and they're brushing me off like, there's nothing wrong with you. And so he's like, no, it's a problem. And so he's like, well, you can become an advocate for your gene. I'm like, what do you mean advocate? He's like, you can actually become a speaker and educate people about this, about your story, and then about the gene and what it causes and the conditions and all the impacts. I'm like, really? And like in the middle of that depression, like this light bulb came on, and like I knew exactly what I was gonna do. And I went home, and I would sit all night researching, creating my information, doing my research, finding that little kids had been collapsing and dying. Professional athletes. Ryan Clark played for the Pittsburgh Steelers during that time in 2007 in Denver, collapsed on the football field, lost his spleen and gallbladder due to sickle cell trait exertion. He can no longer play in Denver. So when I'm finding all this stuff, I'm looking at regular people who were active in the community, doing things, exercising, and they've collapsed, and the families had no idea. And then the college students playing football, and they're trying to get to the pros or whatever their mentality is, and they collapse on the field, and the athletic department doesn't know what's going on, and then the families don't know. And then when they do the test, sickle cell trait is a trigger, and now the child is gone. So you think those parents want a check from the school, or would they want their child back?
Right.
So my thing is, what's the value of life? And there's so many things around the sickle cell trait that is African American. Yeah, we own that. I'm telling the community, yes, we own it. We're number one. What are we going to do with that? Who are we going to be about that? And these diseases and these gene conditions don't define us.
Yeah.
That
And
we can have life.
And these are fathers and mothers and children, and we have to be proactive. There's no other way. You have to be proactive.
You have to be aware. You have to know.
You have to know, and I, you talked about the light bulb, but I think we all have these moments. We all have to have them.
Yes.
And I'm glad that we all. I believe in. Some people can call it karma. You can call it spirituality. You can call it God. Whatever
Purpose
works for you. But we are messengers to each other.
Yes.
We always are, and we touch people's lives, and that person that came to you and gave you the information and opened that door for you to have, now we're closing one door, but we're going to open another. And we go through stages in life. And what has happened to you, and that you survived through that, and you're taking that strength, that military strength, the discipline, the passion. And there is a lot of that. I work with veterans every day. I know how it is.
Yes.
And that beautiful passion, you take it now and you're bringing it to a purpose that is changing people's lives.
Yes.
And every day. And I think we got to hold on to it, because they're going to be hard days.
Yes.
They're going to be hard days.
It's when he told me that, like I said, I went home, I did my research. My sister was in college. She helped me put my story together with some powerful words, so I did my story, but also I started doing more research. And that's, social media, then was pretty big, Facebook. And so I found some sickle cell support groups. And then I found that the SCDA was having their conference. So I put together my brochure, packed up my bags, and I flew to the conference. And people were like, who are you? And I'm talking about sickle cell trait exertion, my sickle cell trait. And that's more of a disease organization. So, I kind of felt out of place, to be honest, because, in this conversation, as I'm discovering, sickle cell trait had a one little piece of paragraph. Make sure you don't mate with another person with the trait.
Sure.
And there's a little disclosure that they usually live a normal life. And the word to me usually means that there's something else that could be possible. And and that's like 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then you have this whole conversation about the impact and results, which is the disease. And so most people focus on the disease conversation because it's little just babies, and it's children and the pain and the suffering. And for me as a prevention advocate, I catch a lot of heat because I focus on the trait, but I also am able to talk about the disease because it is one of the results of having sickle cell trait if you mate with a person. So I kind of keep the conversation a little separate from the disease.
Send the heat my way.
Yeah,
I'm
gonna. But I can take it though. I take it though because
but I think it's
what I do.
I'm just gonna say, there's room and place for everything, and we should not fight over the population,
exactly.
Because and it is we're kind of joking about it, but it's a take-home point. We need to work together.
Yes.
There is time to treat the people that have the disease. There is time. Really, the trait relates to the disease. You want not only to prevent people with the trait mating, but here's the fact of life. They're going to. Some of them are not going to know they have the trait. Not everybody has the money, the knowledge, the access to get genetic testing, and people fall in love, and young people, our brain is not fully developed at that time. We may just do it, whatever it is. Even if it doesn't get to the disease, but it gets to the trait, it gets to the fact that somebody can go through the exertion, they can go through that thing where they run a certain kind of life, and then suddenly a detrimental effect on their life comes around. We need to deal with that.
Even after I start to discover and meet people with the trait that would talk about, I've had pains in my arms and legs, and I remember 5 years old. Now I'm gonna go back to 75 to date myself. My left arm would ache as a child, and my grandmother would hold me over the sink and run warm water over it, and that's the only thing that would calm that pain, that sensation. I call it a sensation. And so they took me to the doctor. They told my grandparents, it's just growing pains. He's 5. He's just growing pains. I lived my entire life with that sensation, but I just became a part of me.
Sure.
And so I can remember, it's like a sensation. It's not like it's sleep.
It's like weakness and tingling.
Yeah,
at the same time.
And it's like I wish I was a black Ken doll that I could take my arm off and put on the shelf. Is how bad it hurts. And so realizing that I have the sickle cell trait gene and the impacts and the results of the pain, it may not be like a person with the disease, but when I relate to them and we talk, it's that same kind of sensation. So, there's, like I said, the people with sickle cell trait, we have to understand that we do carry one copy of the gene, and we know what 2 copies do, but what is this one copy of gene doing to our bodies, which is causing some, secondary complications. And
in a way you touched about, what happens from childhood to lifetime. When we look at that span of time, we need to think about what kind of changes or things a person needs to incorporate in their life in order to make those type of symptoms less severe. Do you want to touch about that? Yes.
Discovering, now looking back and doing research, how important diet is, how important the sugars, even I discovered that having sickle cell trait or sickle cell disease, eating starches, and how starches actually deplete the proteins and the oxygen from the bloodstream. I mean, so if to know about how it impacts our daily lives, we don't look at that long term. We look at, I'm gonna get some McDonald's and because it's quick, but not really looking where that. I say now, eating to your gene type, because if that gene is from Africa, like I said, what do they eat over there? We're not eating those foods here. We're eating. I'm black, but I'm eating Mexican food, or I'm eating lasagna or things like that.
Fast food.
Or fast food, right? So it could be that the food that I'm eating is not providing the minerals and the nutrients that my body needs, especially having a gene condition. I need more water than the average person. I need more nutrients and minerals than the average person. And if you don't know that, your diet is gonna deplete those things.
And the effort that you're making are going to have limited effect. So with my patients and people that I see, I always take them to a checkup, to a nutritional checkup.
Yes.
And then the next thing we do is we review what they're eating. And we take a look. And then there's the part where they're not honest and they want to impress you. And then there's the part where they're actually, okay, fine, I'll tell you what.
I eat burritos.
Really last night I had this and that and Carl's Jr.
Right.
And you go, okay, all right, let's make sense out of it. But it is true, because if you think about your food, it is the fuel for your body.
Yes.
It is what your body is made of. It is what's going to make make it or break it. And people who have sensitivities, like I have a sensitivity for sugar,
Right.
even above and beyond, everyone is suffering from a sugar problem.
Exactly.
And it's not good for anyone. And by the way, the sugar, hate to destroy it for all of you there, but it is the catalyst for cancer, tumors. It exacerbates medical conditions that you have. Whatever it is you have, sugar is going to make it worse. It lives on sugar.
Exactly.
Okay. So, but even if people like, for example, in my family, from my origin, we have sensitivity to sugar that's even extra. If I eat sugar, I'll start feeling weakness
Wow.
in my arms, in my legs. I will feel this type of fatigue. And you don't have to even have a trait and my genetics does have a particular Middle Eastern path to it. So
Right.
I am cognizant of that in my diet. We have to teach that to young generation, to people of the young generation, and start teaching them to enjoy healthy foods.
Yes.
See, your taste will change. When you start changing your eating habits, your taste buds change. And you will start noticing, let's say if you ate clean for a few weeks, really clean, low salt and low sugar, and a diet that's homemade, not processed food, and you start trying to eat now restaurant food
Yeah.
or processed, many of us will tell the
Yes.
difference.
Yeah, of course.
You'll start getting thirsty. You need to drink a lot. Why do you need to drink a lot? It's got a lot of stuff in it. It's not good for you. I was going to use a bad word, but it is. You need. It's a ton of. Remember that what preserves the food is salt and sugar.
All the MSGs, the man-made products that the body does not, like you say, it doesn't digest, and some of it feeds off of it. So you're figuring if you're eating the McDonald's and the Carl's Jr., not to bash, but that stuff is not breaking down in your stomach.
Correct.
And that's where all this disease starts to happen, colon cancer and all this, because it's not being digested. And so I pay attention to my community, and I see, drinking soda and eating, like you said, eating those foods, and I'm like, why do you think you have a crisis?
Right.
Like if you look at what you're eating, those are triggers.
Correct.
Not just the weather or you exercising, but your food is going to be a trigger in that crisis, and how long it's going to last, and then how severe it is, I believe.
Speaking of that, let's talk about, this is a little bit of a sensitive point, but here's a fact of life. That's right. Let's go for it. I go for those points. Because that's at the end of the day, that's what's important. One of the main reasons why people eat a lot of fast food, with the exception of lack of knowledge, is finance.
Yes.
Okay, people that make a certain kind of income, a low income, or a very modest income, and have a few kids to feed, going to spend $2 for a burger is not the same as you're going to, buy a small piece of meat that's going to cost $10 and it's
Right.
good for one person.
Exactly.
So there is a problem. We have to face the problem that there is an issue, a financial issue of having a difficulty managing your budget, the food budget. In fact, what studies show, and we know that I graduated with economics, and one of the areas I used to look at for my bachelor's degree is how much money people spend on their food out of their total income. And
Yes.
people who make less money sometimes spend 50, 60, 70% of their income on food.
Yes.
And so, ta-da, and it's the truth. And so when you think about that, how likely is a person, even if you got them motivated and you got them this and that, how likely are they to actually go and buy the healthy foods?
If hearing you say that, I still believe that it's a mindset. It's still being able to make that choice to go to the store versus the convenience of going to the corner and going through the drive-through. I still think it's something that still can be taught.
Absolutely.
How you can, whether you earn, $10 an hour, you can still buy food that can feed you that's not fast food. I think there's something that just needs to be taught.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one thing that I work with people on in my own profession. But I'll tell you, even when people say to me, well, could it be real? Could you actually do it? And I say, you know what? When I was in my educational program, when I was earning my PhD, I had 3 babies during that time in 5 years.
Wow.
We lived at my parents-in-law's house at the bottom floor. It was like boot camp. You want to talk about, seriously, with the 3 kids, and they're hungry all the time. Anyone who has little kids knows they're hungry all the time. And, I had to make a decision, and I could not feed them garbage because I knew too much about this. I could
Right.
not give them bad food. So we started making a plan, and it's absolutely what you were saying, that it's a mindset, it's a decision,
Yeah.
and it's an issue of making it an organized thing for your family.
Exactly.
Every Sunday or every Saturday, whichever day it is you choose, you're going to go once a week and you're going to buy all the foods. And here's the no excuses with the money. Places like Trader Joe's
Yeah.
selling, I know a lot of families that live under Trader Joe's food, and I'm giving them free advertisement right now.
right. All right,
Right.
Trader Joe's.
Come and sponsor us. Seriously, we need it. No, but it's true, because they sell organic food at a lower cost. You can go to all the markets that are local markets and have those events and make it an experience for your kid.
Yes.
Like, okay, going to watch all these movies with all these blobs and whatever. I don't even know the names of those
Right.
movies.
Don't say
But
them.
my kids laugh. They just say, you call it blobs, Mom. And I say, yeah, because they're blobs.
Yeah.
But I say we take them to the movies, and that's great, and we take them to other things, to games, and that's great. But this is a thing you can make as a family experience.
Yes.
You could take them with you. You can start teaching them how to cook too. They can do it with you in the kitchen. Like, I get my kids to
Exactly.
cut the fruits and vegetables, and even though it looks kind of funky, it's fun. And you make it an experience. And then what they see, here's what we know in psychology: what they see and what's available is what they're going to eat.
Exactly.
And here's more: what they see and what's available, they're going to eat when they're older. So it's a skill that is learned for life. We know that people who were raised, kids who were raised with good diet habits when they were young, even when they got older, they had an occasional cake here or the occasional fast food here.
Right.
In reality, 80-90% of their diet is very similar, if not almost identical, to the way that they grew up.
Yeah.
So we have to think about these kids that are drinking sodas and eating burgers and everything. Is that what we want our kid to eat when they're older? And is that what we want to give them? It really is. It's not the fuel that they need for growth.
Exactly.
But this is important. Let's go back to our topic today. Why is that particularly important for individuals with the trait?
As far as diet,
The diet.
like I said, as far as the diet, as far as the hydration, like I said, the
Hydration.
quality, the type of food, that provides the minerals. Like I said, maybe you may not want to eat. I'm learning that canned vegetables is not even as healthy as going to the aisle and getting the fresh vegetables. So I'm learning myself, because I was going to tell you, I have this mentality of, and I served in the military all these years. When you eat on the military base, like, you have your choices. You have the fast food line, or you have the meal line. And so it's a no-brainer. You just give me a vegetable, a starch, a meat, and that's your meal. Not for me. I have to reprogram my brain, because now I know I don't have to eat that kind of foods. I can actually eat healthier types of food that will give me the same type of energy. Like, I have a way that breakfast should look.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to look like pancakes and eggs and sausage, but people are telling me, no, you don't have to have that. You can actually have nuts and these things that will give you the same nutrients. I'm like, really?
Right. Expanding the window of what kind of foods you can eat. There is so much out there that can be used as replacement.
Yes. And see, that's where I'm stuck at in life now, is like, I have a view of what dinner looks like. And so to now try to go outside of that view, like you say, and now expand to figure out what else can I eat that's going to give me the nutrients, because now I suffer from arthritis. So now I that was one of my discharges from the military. My retirement was the severe depression and arthritis. And so now, my joints hurt, and now I know I need to eat foods that are not going to give me inflammation.
Correct.
Things like that. So I have to reprogram my whole entire point of view of my diet.
It's interesting you're saying that, because there's various situations in life and things you go through with the ages, but particularly now that you're hitting a certain point in time and you talk about inflammation, there are things somebody can do. Like, for example, pineapples are anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
You can start incorporating, there's either the pineapple itself as it's fresh, which is always best, but if you really suffer from inflammation, you can look into, and with your physician's permission, powder. There is concentrated pineapple powder that is just like an anti-inflammatory. It has a lot of positive effects the same way, instead of taking an actual over-the-counter medication.
Right.
So that's another option. And like you're saying, when you start looking at food as an experimental thing,
Yeah.
I'm going to try different things and see what works for me, and I'm going to expand my horizon. You start finding out about spices. There are a lot of spices that are good for the brain. There are a lot of spices that can replace salt and make the food taste really good without you having to load it up on the salt.
Right.
There's the hydration that you were talking about. You can make various kinds of foods that are water based.
Well, I started to learn again alkaline, and having the body, like what they say is the disease can't survive in an alkaline body, only in an acidic body. And so learning to have the proper pH level of your body's, intake of water and things like that. Also, the alkaline water hydrates the cells as well. So knowing, like I said, knowing now what I know now, those are the little changes that I can implement to help get back to that basketball life. That's my goal, is to get back on the court and play ball again and live. I don't want to, I almost let this being a disabled veteran, like it almost defined me, because I caught myself, now I'm limited. But then as I share with my community that same thing of this disease doesn't define you, then I have to look at myself, and my disability doesn't define me. So I still go to the gym just to smell the sweat on the wall and hear the squeaky floor and maybe take a couple of shots, but I'm there, and I may play a game or two, and I may hurt that night, but my mind is free. And to me, that's most important, is to have my mind clear, and I can bear the pain. We soldier through that. I soldiered through that for 20-something years. As we get hurt all the time, and they tell you, don't go to sick call, you soldier through that. And unfortunately, sometimes that's bad. But
it's a different kind of fight.
Yeah, it's a different kind of fight.
But you talked about defining, and I think that's another phenomenal point to touch on. Whatever it is we suffer from, we are not our diagnosis.
Yeah.
We cannot define ourselves by our diagnosis. And one of the important things is to see beyond. Okay, so we suffer from depression, or even severe depression, or we have a particular disease, but what else is about us?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's something that we have. It's something that we're struggling with. It's something we are working on. But there's so much other things about us and about what we want our life to look like.
Shouts out to my man Herms. He has sickle cell disease, lives in Florida, and he posted after the fact that he had attempted to take his life. He was tired of living with the disease. And when I saw his post, I immediately was like, hey, call me. And so I talked to him, and he and I talked, and it was great to hear how he survived that suicide, but yet he saw that I survived this for a reason. Like, God didn't let me go. Like, there's something to this. And now he wants to help talk about mental stability, mental toughness, living with sickle cell. And so I encourage him, to this day, to find your voice. And what he told me was, when he was in the psychiatric ward, that he was talking to people there, and he and sharing the conversation. And he, what are your hobbies? And so he started to talk with people about hobbies. And so that's one of the things that you mentioned. What else do you like to do? You have the disease, yes, that's a reality. But then what are your passions? What do you like to do? Some of us with our spiritual background, we discover what our purpose is. And maybe that, what I share with my community is, when I interview them, is, what do you want the world to know about sickle cell? And you have them think about that, then maybe that's your voice. Because in the military, you have privates all the way up to the commander, and every person has a role. They have a job skill, they have a voice, they have what they're trained to do. And so mobilizing the community is one of my things I want to accomplish. And by doing that, in sickle cell, there's awareness, there's prevention, and then there's education. All three topics are very different levels of topics. And so I ask people, what do you want the world to know? Because that could be your voice, and then we can have you expand on that and how your life experience relates to that topic. And now we can see, where do you fit in this war on sickle cell? Because that's what I'm creating, a war on sickle cell. And so once they discover that, then they discover, hey, well, I like to make T-shirts, or I'm an engineer or a graphics designer. Then you could actually support your awareness, like they told me, with your graphics. So now you can go on, get accounts, maybe create websites for people, share who you are, and now that becomes an income. Versus sitting at home like, my life is over and what am I going to do, which is how I was. So having those conversations, that the disease doesn't define you, that your disabilities don't define you, and then discovering your voice and what you're living with, can shift your whole thought process. And then now you're living with this disease or disorder or condition, but you're also making a difference at the same time, and you're doing your hobby. You know, I never thought I'd be on the radio, and it's just it started with the sports show, and when I saw that everything shifted to my awareness, then that's where I saw, well, this platform can be used to share stories.
Absolutely.
And it just I'm Blog Talk for 4 years, and I made time for the awareness incorporated with the sports, and to this day I still do that show.
And this is you're talking about passion, but even in my field, okay, I'm the first neuropsychologist ever to go on radio.
That's deep.
And do this. And I in a way, even though we have all this knowledge and we have all this work, I also didn't know how it's gonna fly. But I had that passion, like you're saying. You have a passion, you have a hobby, you have a dream. You take all of that and you take your talent and resources and you march with it. And there's nothing more powerful than the passion and the want of a human being.
Yes.
And everything else, you can endure a lot of other things when you work for the cause of a betterment of people. And the most beautiful things happen when many people get together. So you were talking about different people taking a talent.
Yes.
And that's the part where we keep ourselves humble and we say, okay, I can't do everything.
Exactly.
I'm not best at everything, but there's so many other talented people out there that can contribute, that can be a part of our movement.
You build a team, and everybody
Absolutely.
has their, everybody, when I create my team around me, nobody's stepping on the other person's toes, because every person's story is unique to them and they have their own talent. So when I create my high school tour, I speak about the trait. I have a person with the disease. I have a music person that lives with sickle cell that sings and plays guitar. So we bring those together, and now you have this movement, and you're sharing your story, and you're living, and you're thriving, and it's not about survival. And your background is very important to me, because how my depression shifted was I took an education called Landmark Education, and they study the brain. And so I don't know how much time I have, but real quick, how my life shifted was, in that class there was a story about the vicious circle, and having the reality of what happened, and then the story that the mind creates, and then collapsing those two worlds, and now your story becomes your reality. And in that moment of my chair, when I looked at my life and discovered, where did I make up a story about my life? Well, it was back in my career when I said my life was over.
Correct.
And when I saw that and discovered that all they told me was that my career, I was pending a medical discharge. It didn't mean, I made it mean my life was over.
Correct.
And so when I bought all that, I bought all the negative off the shelf.
Right.
And when I separated those two and saw the reality of what they said and then what I chose to make it mean, I can make it mean whatever I want.
Exactly.
So I replaced that negative conversation with my advocacy work. So now my life is not over. Actually, I've dedicated my life to this other cause called sickle cell trait awareness.
This is incredible, and you're really depicting one of the topics I always talk in my show is about really harnessing the energy that you have inside you and move from closing one chapter and opening another. And that transitioning is very important. And we know about veterans in general, there's major issues of transitioning.
Of course.
And I see it almost with every single one of the combat veterans I work with. And even on our world professionally, that's one of the things we work on is always, and we do one of the things I like to do is visualization with people, and I have them look inside and they see that one door closing, but immediately as that door closing, they need to see another open.
Out the window.
They gotta see that, and they gotta walk through that door. I want them to walk through that door because they need to see there's a whole new chapter to your life. And you look with respect and dignity about the life that you've just concluded, the type of experience you had, and then you look with desire and excitement for that new chapter. And it's ageless. It is an ageless experience. I absolutely do not want people to define that by their age, by their condition, by their cultural background. No, we are all ageless
like
in
you
some
say,
way.
for veterans like myself, it was the identity.
Correct.
When I made my sergeant rank, I was Sergeant Farron Dozier, and I was proud. And then I became a staff sergeant. Then I became a sergeant first class. So even in civilian clothes, I introduced myself. I'm Sergeant First Class Farron. Like, that was my identity. That was me. And when that was being taken away, now who am I? And
Right.
like you said, once I discovered that, I know why God allowed me to serve all those years and be in those positions, because that same mentality that I learned from the military, fighting for this country, I now can fight for this community. And I have all the resources and knowledge to do that.
Absolutely. We're all soldiers in different ways when we choose to do the right thing.
Exactly.
And just to conclude, and do we have a few minutes? Okay, great. Thank you so much. It goes by so fast. It's been a great hour, and this so much more of this needs to be done. But I do want to say about just one more take-home point for any of you listeners who have family members, and particularly children and teenagers who are suffering from sickle cell trait or the disease, or even another condition that they're going through. It doesn't have to be that, but it could be depression. It could be a different kind of issue. Please do focus on, in addition to everything else that you're doing, focus on giving them hobbies. Focus on giving them something that doesn't relate to the disorder. And I'm telling you that from experience, is that when you're just focusing on treating the problem, but you're not giving something else, you're not giving a future, you're not giving something that the person can just purely enjoy, then you're not giving them something to look forward to. And they need to get occupied in something. They need to get occupied in something that they're proud of, not just occupation because it keeps them for 2 hours busy, but to give them something they connect to emotionally. If it didn't work out with sports, try something else. Try music. Didn't do music, do art. Experiment with your kid and see what's going to click, because every brain is different, and if something is going to click for your kid, and that thing may actually save their life.
Exactly.
And make their life
the mental
a different
toughness.
experience.
Mental toughness is where, I'm a, like I said, prevention advocate for sickle cell trait, but I understand that it's the mental state is the first part. And if you can get that mind right, then the body will get in line.
Yep.
And not everybody's spiritual, so that's why there's so many different life skills programs out there. And so you have to, some of us are born with the mental toughness, but some of us, you have to be taught that, and that's something you have to teach.
Correct, and it's a topic of resilience.
Yes.
Well, this has been wonderful. I want to thank you so much for coming on the
you.
show today. This was phenomenal. Yay!
Thank you.
And we're going to fight.
Oh, yes.
We're going to keep fighting.
This is just the start.
This is just the start, and we're always going to continue and fight for the betterment of people. And, we all have low days and low moments. So if your loved one is going through a hard time, you pick them up. They'll pick you up when you're feeling low, and you're going to pick them up when they feel low. And that should be the agreement.
And from my sickle cell community, for the parents and the friends of people with sickle cell or patients, you got to be able to listen to that person, pay attention to them, because you will see the signs of the withdrawal and things like that. So just pay attention to what's going on around you and those people that you care about.
Yeah, and just be there for them when they're going through that. It might take some time, so people need the time to figure out, the most important thing is not to dismiss someone's emotions, not to just say, okay, get over it or whatever, or just be irritated near them. Just let them go through the process they have to go through, and that's the best way for them to reach where they need to reach. If you do have any more questions, where can you be reached?
I use my cell phone, 323-215-5384, and my website is wdconsct.org, and all my information's there about sickle cell trait, sickle cell disease, sickle cell exertion.
And if you want to reach out to me, if you're having a hard time finding the information, or you want to get in contact with Farron Dozier, please do email me, drdgaines@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook, The Dr. D Show. Please support us and support the causes that we are working on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. This was phenomenal. May you have a beautiful and wonderful week.
Thank you.
Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBN Radio.